a lot of cemeteries in Victoria and Australia have a lone pine. These lone pines were commemorating the centennial of the Anzac landing at Gallipoli on the 25th of April 1915. Guys, welcome to the Anzac 26. I'm going to go for a little bit of a walk around here, and you'll soon find out what the Anzac 26 is all about. Cemeteries in Australia have got an area where they commemorate the people who went to war. Today we are going to go on a little trek to find 26 graves that have a little bit of a story to them. So come along and let's see if we can find all 26. First served with distinction. This is the first one, James Frederick Kitson, whose headstone carries no reference to his military service, was a 23-year-old butter factory manager when he enlisted in August 5th, 1915. He embarked for overseas service on April 1st, 1916 on the Suffolk and spent 4 months in Egypt, attached to the Cyclist Training Battalion. In September 1916 he joined the 8th Battalion in France. In April 1917 he was withdrawn from the line, suffering from shell shock, but was able to rejoin his unit a few weeks later. In October of that year, his gallantry earned him the Military Medal. Towards the end of the war he undertook officer training in England. In May 1919 he was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. His brother Errol enlisted just a couple of days after James had served overseas with the 5th Division Signal Company. He returned safely to Australia after the wars. So nice to know that a couple here had made it back. Number 2 on the list, prisoner of war, Richard William Rees, was a 25-year-old miner from Albert Street, Sebastopol. But his address was the Victory Dining Room at Boulder in WA. When he enlisted at Black Boy Hill outside Perth on October the 6th, 1915. He travelled with the 4th Depot Battalion before embarking from Fremantle on the 12th of February 1916. On arrival in Egypt he joined the 51st Battalion, and in June he moved to France. On September the 3rd, 1916, during the fighting at Monquet Farm, he was wounded, sustained a gunshot wound to his back. At the same time he was captured and became a prisoner of war, being interned at Gießen in Darmstadt. At one point he sent home a postcard which stated simply, "I am well, my parcels are arriving very good." When the war ended he was quickly repatriated to England, arriving there in December 12th, 1918. He returned to Australia on a Navassa, reaching Fremantle on April 13th, 1919. Now those notes, the postcard stating "I am well, arriving very good." Yeah, you got to wonder whether they've been falsified, those ones. Number 3, an Anzac nurse, Sister Emily Pauline Cherry Ireland, born in Ballarat, was in Tasmania when she enlisted with the Australian Army Nursing Service. She left Australia on June the 12th aboard the Moulton, but upon reaching Suez she was transferred to the 60th British General Hospital in Salonika in Greece, where 1 in 5 of the nurses was Australian. They worked mostly in tent hospitals where most of their patients were suffering from malaria and diphtheria. Sister Cherry developed rheumatic fever and was assessed as fit only for home duties or light duties. She was returned to Australia on the Canoa, disembarking on November the 17th. In November 1917, she was discharged from the AANS in December 1918, and in 1920 she married Charles Alexander Ireland. There's a little bit of a picture of all the nurses there who were over there in Greece, and this is where she died, 15th of July 1929, aged 71 years. An early pilot loss. Walker John Mercer was a Ballarat chemist from Sturt Street when he enlisted in 1914. He left Australia on the Chilka, February 1915. He initially joined the 3rd Light Horse Field Ambulance, with whom he saw action at Gallipoli. During 1917, he transferred to train with the Royal Flying Corps and graduated as 2nd Lieutenant Flying Officer in November of that year. He was killed in action in Palestine on 22nd of August 1918 while serving with the Australian Flying Corps, and was buried in Ramleh War Cemetery in Palestine with Chaplain F.G. Hughes officiating. He is also commemorated on this family grave. Some awesome headstones here. We've got one here that belongs to Archibald Snedden, the sacrifice of Golden Point boys. Archibald, also known as Archie, attended the Golden Point State School in Ballarat East, the same state school as Gallipoli VC winner William Dunstan. He was a blacksmith at the time and enlisted in 1916. He embarked for overseas service on April 1st, 1916 on the Suffolk. He was serving with the 8th Battalion when he was killed in action during an advance on Polygon Wood on September 20th, 1917. He was initially buried near where he fell, but later reburied at Tyncott Cemetery in Belgium. So a lot of these graves that you've been seeing, the person mentioned is not here. They're family graves or memorial graves. A non-combatant hero. Charles Hardy was a 54-year-old surgeon and physician when he joined in 1915. He's previously served as a Medal Corps captain with the Citizens Forces. He embarked from Melbourne aboard the Ajana, attached to the 6th Field Ambulance. He served with such distinction at Gallipoli, Egypt, and in France that he was awarded a Distinguished Service Order. Alright, so there's a little bit of a story there. In November 16, he was admitted to hospital suffering from trench fever and transferred to the No. 3 General Hospital in London suffering from influenza. In February 1917, he departed England on the Ulysses and returned to Australia. And on August 21st, his appointment was terminated due to ill health. And this is his grave here. Number 8. Served with distinction in 2 wars. Samuel James Ainsworth, DCM, from Otway Street in Ballarat, trained at the School of Mines and became a woodwork teacher before enlisting as a 21-year-old in July 1915. He sailed from Melbourne on the Suffolk April 1916 and served in France in the 7th Battalion. In October 1917, his gallantry as a runner during heavy fighting near Zonebeck in Belgium earned him the Distinguished Conduct Medal. He was instrumental in capturing a German machine gun and 7 prisoners. He served again with the 101st Motor Regiment during World War II, reaching the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. And this is his grave here. Here's one that's just a little bit different. Do you reckon he might have been a sheep farmer? Not a blood relative, Roy Lawton, foster son of Fanny Goad from Ballarat, was educated at MacArthur Street State School. As a single woman, she had taken him in as an infant and brought him up to call her auntie. He was just 18, a slaughterman, when he enlisted in 1915. He embarked from Australia on a Macarini and served as a driver with 1st Brigade Australian Field Artillery, with his courage earning for him the Military Medal in October 1917. On August 9th, 1918, he suffered a fatal gunshot wound to the stomach while fighting near Amiens and was buried at Adelaide Cemetery near Villers in France. After the war, Mrs. Goad had some difficulty convincing the military authorities of her entitlement to become custodian of his military medal, although this was ultimately resolved in her favour. There you go. And the shop that's actually pictured there is quite a well-known shop here in Ballarat. It still stands today. Number 10, he still volunteered to do his bit. Duncan Archibald, Rob from Lock Avenue, Ballarat, was 40 years old when he enlisted in February 1916. He trained first at Ballarat, then at Oak Park, Melbourne, where he was promoted to corporal with the 21st Battalion. He became ill and was admitted to the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne, where he died of cerebrospinal meningitis on June 26, 1916. This is where he lays down. Enough sacrifice for one family. Albert Edward Roberts was a 26-year-old wood machinist, married to Florence when he enlisted in Melbourne on the 29th January 1916. He had grown up in Ballarat and already had 2 brothers serving with the AIF. He sailed from Melbourne on the Runic on June the 20th and disembarked at Plymouth, England on August 10th. With the 10th Field Company engineers, he crossed to France in November 1916, but on October the 5th, 1917, during the fighting at Passchendaele, he was killed in action. It was reported that he was buried, but his grave could not be located. He is commemorated on the Meaning Gate Memorial at Aespa in Belgium, and on the grave of his parents, William and Elizabeth. Generations of service. Patrick Bennett was a 25-year-old teamster from Narracourt when he enlisted in February 1916, having had previously served in the 22nd Light Horse Regiment in South Australia. He embarked from Adelaide on the Commonwealth on September 21st and reached France in mid-December to serve in the 50th Battalion. On April 2nd, 1917, he was first reported wounded in action, then wounded and missing. He was subsequently confirmed that he had become a prisoner of war and was held at Limburg in Germany for the remainder of the war. A postcard he was able to mail in June recorded, "Now receiving parcels regularly every fortnight. I've been unwell lately with my back, but I feel a little better now. Must thank you very much for food parcels, for good parcels." He was repatriated in England in 1819 and eventually disembarked back to Australia on June the 18th. His son Frank continued the family commitment to serving his country while he was killed in action in New Guinea in December 1933, while another son, Brian, served with the RAF. A mother's grief. Andrew Morrow from Ballarat was educated in Ballarat College. He was 28-year-old bank clerk and enlisted in 1914. 2 months later he sailed from Melbourne on the Southern and he reached Gallipoli to serve with the 1st Light Horse Field Ambulance. In January 1916, while in Egypt, he was transferred to the 59th Battalion, and in February he was commissioned as a 2nd Lieutenant. On July 19th, he was reported as missing in action from Mel's, but the following day he was taken to the 2nd Australian Casualty Clearing Station, suffering from a gunshot wound to his face. On July 21st, 1916, at the age of 30, he dies of his wounds and was buried at Beaulieu Community Cemetery near Lille in France. His brother Thomas, who was 34-year-old, married to Lucy, was wounded during the fierce fighting of Passchendaele in Belgium and died of his wounds on October 12, 1917. He was buried at the Leissoc Military Cemetery. Third brother, Hugh, served in France, 1916, but the death of Thomas made him feel he should be at home. His mother was already a widow and now lost 2 sons, so in February he applied. In 1918 he applied to return to Australia for family reasons. His application was approved and he returned safely. So there you go. So 3 boys, 1 came home. There are many war graves here in this cemetery, from World War II as well as World War I. Number 15, an Anzac larrikin. Joseph Henry Scott was from Inkerman Street, Ballarat, and had attended the Urquhart Street State School. The family headstone records that the family had already experienced tragedy through the accidental drowning in Lake Wendouree of Joseph's 14-year-old brother in 1906. Joseph was a baker and enlisted in March 1915. He left Australia on the Ajana in June 1915 and served first at Gallipoli and then deployed to France as a driver with the 6th Field Ambulance. 1916, he was charged with conduct to the prejudice of good military order and disciplined in that he neglected to comply with traffic regulations, thereby causing an accident to a horse, which necessitating its destruction. His penalty, but you go to war and you I don't know. His penalty for being the loss of 7 days' pay and a confiscation of his driver's certificate. With this incident behind him, he continued to serve and was promoted to corporal. On August 18, 1918, less than 3 months before the end of the war, he was killed by a shell burst and is buried at Dunnor's Communal Cemetery Extension. He was aged 29. God, after all of that. My God. There's a little picture of him. I think it's a picture of him. This is a commemorative grave of an Anzac larrikin. Alright, number 16, killed at the Gallipoli landing. Frederick William Watson was born in Ballarat and educated at the Urquhart State School. He was living in Melbourne, single 24-year-old clerk. He was enlisted on September the 10th, 1914. He embarked on October 19th with the 7th Battalion aboard the Horarata. He was listed as missing during the confusion of the Gallipoli landing. That was on April 25th, 1915. There was speculation he had been drowned after jumping into deep water from his landing boat, but in June 1916 a court of inquiry found he was killed in action. The inquiry took evidence that he was seen pushing inland from the beach when he was shot, but his mates were unable to reach him in no man's land. He has no known grave, but is remembered on the grave of his parents and on the Australian Memorial at Lone Pine, Gallipoli. He's commemorated here with his parents. Number 17, cousins who gave their all. Harold Gordon Cornell was an electrician. He enlisted as a 25-year-old in August 1960. He enlisted at Claremont in Tasmania, where he trained with the 1st Depot Battalion. He embarked on the Ulysses on October 25th, 1916 to join the 69th Squadron, Australian Flying Corps, as a wireless operator. After a period of training in England, he graduated as a flying officer with the rank of 2nd Lieutenant. He was posted to the 68th Squadron, AFC, on December the 11th, 1917. He was killed when he crashed near Dernancourt in France. He was 27 years old and is buried in the Dernancourt Communal Cemetery Extension. His cousin, Osborne Cornell, was a 21-year-old chemist when he enlisted in 1914. He served with the 2nd Field Ambulance and the 3rd Machine Gun Battalion and was killed in action on August the 18th, 1918, the 4th anniversary of his enlistment. He has no known grave and is commemorated on the Australian National Memorial at Villers in France. Reginald Reed, enlisted in 1915. He was 23 years of age and married to Gwen. In March 1916, he sailed on the Achilles, first to England and then to France, where he served with the 14th Battalion. On April 11th, 1917, he was reported missing in action at Rhyncourt, but it was not until late July that he was confirmed that he had been wounded, suffering a gunshot wound to his left shoulder, taken prisoner of war, and imprisoned at Gefdalmen in Westphalia, Germany, where he remained until the end of the war. He returned to Australia in March 1919. And this is his grave here. and he died at the age of 60 in 1950. This is the grave of Percy Gilchrist, number 20. 20 generations, number 20 I should say, generations of soldiers. Percy Gilchrist is commemorated on the grave of his parents, Edward and Maria. He was Ballarat born, 36-year-old geologist when he enlisted. He embarked from Melbourne on a Persic on June 3rd, 1916 and served with distinction on the Western Front with the 37th Battalion, his courage earning him a Distinguished Service Order, second only to the Victoria Cross. The citation for which read for conspicuous gallantry and devotion to duty on the night of the 29th and 30th of August 1918 at Clary, in charge of his company of only 28 men with 25 prisoners. He was attacked by some 150 of the enemy. His performance was a splendid one, and it was due to his determined courage and able leadership that his company, besides holding out, retained their prisoners. The end of the war was in sight when he was killed in action at Court just 10 days later in September the 9th, 1918. He was carried to the 41st Casualty Clearing Station by Private Mitchell and Padre Golla. He is buried at Heath Cemetery in France, and he is commemorated on this grave here. A little bit of a headstone in memory of the old pioneers prior to 1853, and this site here has unrecorded graves. Sister Sarah Bell was one of more than 3,000 civilian nurses who volunteered to join the Australian Army Nursing Service. She was born at Scarsdale in 1874. Just 2 weeks after the 1915 war, she joined the AENs, having been assigned to the Sea Transport Section. She embarked from Melbourne on Orontes. Here we go, we're going to have fun with some names. On the first of several voyages to and from the battle zones of Europe and the Middle East on the nursing staff of troop and hospital ships Wandilla, Ulysses, Mesta, Gaika and Wairema. She was discharged on the 28th of January 1919, and she lays here today. Sarah Bell died 10th of December 1943, along with Elizabeth Mary Bell and William Bell. This is a tale of two brothers lost to history. Gordon Crocker, he sailed on the Benalla, first to Egypt and then on to Gallipoli. He was mortally wounded on July 28th, 1915, suffering a shrapnel wound to the head. He was 28 years of age, and he is buried in Beach Cemetery at the southern end of Anzac Cove. Okay. Frederick Eustace Crocker, Gordon's brother, enlisted on March 28, 1915. His brother Gordon was already in Egypt. He was 28 years old. He embarked from Sydney on the Themistocles and saw action at Gallipoli before moving to France. On August the 3rd, 1916, he was wounded in action, suffered a gunshot wound to the face. He was transferred to hospital in England, but was able to rejoin his unit in November. He was serving in the 17th Battalion when he was killed in action at Bull Court on 3rd of May 1917. He has no known grave, and this one is one of the 10,885 Australians listed on the Australian Memorial as being passed away there. He was 30 years of age. This is a memorial grave to them. Brothers in different uniforms. Charles Gitcham from Cobden Street in Ballarat was just 18, a labourer when he enlisted in 1916. He trained in the 14th Depot Battalion in Ballarat and the 19th Depot Battalion at Geelong before embarking from Melbourne aboard the Themistocles. While in England, he joined the 39th Battalion and moved to France in late November 1916. On June 8th, 1917, at the age of 19, he was killed in action at the Messines Ridge in Belgium. He was buried by comrades, but after the war, his grave could not be identified, so he has no known grave. He is commemorated on the Menin Gate at Yespers. His older brother James, enlisted at the age of 20, 1915. He listed his occupation as salesman, but seemed to be also a master builder and architectural craftsman. He served on Gallipoli with the 5th Field Company Engineers, but in October 1916 he was transferred to duty with the Royal Flying Corps, where he was commissioned as a second lieutenant. On the 4th of April 1917 he was serving with the 35th Squadron operating from Fleselles in France, when on June 29th 1918 he crashed on takeoff and was killed. He was buried at Venacourt British Cemetery. This is the family grave here. There's anguish. Herbert Hughes from Albert Street in Sebastopol was a 24-year-old grocer when he enlisted for the First World War. He embarked from Melbourne on May the 4th on the Port Lincoln, first to Egypt and then to France, where he joined the 58th Battalion. It seemed that for more than 12 months he avoided injury or less, but on the March 27, 1918, he was killed in action on the Somme area and was buried at the St. Paul British Cemetery in France. He was 26 years of age. His younger brother Victor enlisted in 1915. Just 3 days after the Gallipoli landing, he joined the 24th Battalion. Left Melbourne on the Euripides. Yeah, good luck with that name. On May the 10th and reached Gallipoli in August. He served through the remaining 4 months of the Gallipoli campaign and moved on to France in March 1916, where he was wounded in action and evacuated to the Beaufort War Hospital in England. He returned to the 24th Battalion in France in September 1917, but in 1918 he too was killed in action near Albert 3 weeks after his brother. He was buried at Wailor Bailon Community Cemetery Extension, his mother Mary subsequently receiving a parcel containing his note case, handkerchief, pocketbook and fountain pen. And this is memorial to them and his mother. a hero even before going to battle. Arthur Walker was educated in Ballarat High School and went to Duntroon Military College. He was a powerful swimmer, and the Australian War Memorials records that while at Duntroon at age 19, he dived into 13 feet of water in the Murrumbidgee River and brought up 2 unconscious fellow cadets. He sailed from Australia in December 1914 on the Ulysses and landed at Gallipoli with the 14th Battalion. A little more than a week into the campaign, he was wounded at Walker's Ridge and subsequently died on board the Davina on the 3rd of May 1915. He was buried at sea. He is commemorated on the Lone Pine Memorial at Gallipoli and here on the grave of his parents, Henry and Gertrude Marie. His younger brother John Walker enlisted on the 6th of August 1918 at the age of 18. With the consent of his parents, who already lost one son, he sailed from Sydney November the 2nd aboard the Medic, but became ill at sea and was admitted to the ship's quarantine hospital, suffering from influenza. With the signing of the armistice on November 11th, the Medic was recalled and arrived back in Sydney in mid-December, so he never saw any of the battle. And this is the family grave here. Tragic loss of life. John Pearce grew up in Ballarat, attending Mount Pleasant State School. He enlisted on the August 18th, 1914, and embarked from Australia on the Benella. In mid-October, he saw action at Gallipoli with the 8th Battalion, suffering a minor gunshot wound to the hand. After a short period in England, he was deployed to the Western Front, where, while serving with a 1st Pioneer Battalion, he was killed in action at Pozieres on the night of July 25th, 26th, 1916. He has no known grave and is commemorated on the Australian National Memorial at Villas and on the family grave here. Some nice old wrought iron ones out this way. Yeah, that's a slate one. Cool. Little stone erected to Colston Voss, son of Dr. William, district surgeon, died 6th of May 1855, aged, is that 4 months? No, something. It's been cut away, a bit hard to see, 9 months maybe. This is one of my favourites, in memory of the beloved children of John and Helen Neal, Corporal in Her Majesty's 40th Regiment, and he died March 19th, 1857, aged 3 years and 8 months. Agnes died April the 10th, 1857, aged 1 year and 4 months. May they rest in peace.